Amazing transformation. Black CEO's seat stolen. Flight grounded after shocking exposé revealed. Marcus Reed sat rigidly in the bustling airport terminal, a world of anticipation swirling around him. His mind raced as a viral exposé torture killed the reputation of Reed Technologies. Headlines blared, Black CEO's seat stolen. The words rang like an unsympathetic clock, counting down to an irrevocable shift in his life. Jealousy, betrayal, shadows of doubt crept into Marcus's psyche. He could feel the weight of his family's dreams bearing down on him, each breath growing more labored. His mother's sacrifices as a single parent, the relentless hustle she embodied, played in his mind like a slideshow of regret. How could he fail her now? The impending flight to Silicon Valley, where a critical investment awaited him, was suddenly grounded. Concrete plans melted into vapor. With every second that ticked by, anxiety gripped him. Should he retaliate against the colleague who had orchestrated his downfall? Revenge stirred a tempest within him, but at what cost? Would it further taint the values his mother had instilled? So many questions surged. Doubts brewed like a storm, ready to rain down his carefully curated life. Marcus, his phone buzzed, an incoming message from Thomas, his mentor. Don't let them push you into darkness. Use this moment. Remember who you are. The words sent a shiver down Marcus's spine. Could he rise above their malice? The pressure was overwhelming, his muscles tensed as if trapped in a vice. Standing up against systemic issues felt monumental, almost out of reach, but Mark's heart lit with a fierce determination. He thought of his late father, a man whose legacy contrasted starkly with the fraud he faced. Each discovery about the injustices his father had endured echoed in his soul. This fight was bigger than just Reed Technologies. It reverberated through time, touching the very essence of his family's struggle. Yet the deeper he dug, the more tangled the web of betrayal became. Each revelation was a splinter in his psyche, reminding him of a time when biases suffocated ambition. Marcus's stomach twisted as the threshold of his upcoming board meeting loomed closer. Would he command the room, expose the corruption, stand firm? Or would he crumble under the weight of expectation, allowing his ancestors' sacrifices to dissolve in a tidal wave of financial ruin? The walls around him felt claustrophobic. Desperation clawed at him like a wild animal. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Silenced thoughts screamed at him, begging for clarity. As he plugged into the hum of the terminal, he stood on the precipice, confronting countless traits he feared he'd inherit. Failure, shame, weakness. In those escalating moments, clawing his way back to a semblance of dignity felt insurmountable. He felt his heart race as he prepared to face a boardroom full of people who could either uplift him or bury him under silence. He clenched his fists, the weight of the moment anchoring him down. Inhaling deeply, Marcus found himself on the edge of an abyss, knowing that stepping into that room would force him to confront the systemic biases that had shadowed him his entire life. All or nothing, he thought. The outcome wasn't just about him anymore. He squared his shoulders, ready to claim the legacy that was rightfully his. The boardroom loomed ahead, its glass walls casting an oppressive glare against the muted lighting. Marcus rubbed the bridge of his nose, fighting the fatigue that threatened to overwhelm him. He was due to present not only the future of Reed Technologies but also the future of his own legacy. As he stepped inside, a hush fell over the room, punctuated only by the clinking of iced glasses and the rustling of papers. He familiarized himself with the faces that stared back, each one a mix of skepticism and expectation. Among them was Kalen, the colleague who had executed the coup and now wore a mask of feigned concern. Marcus felt bile rise in his throat. How could someone so treacherous look so innocent? He took a deep breath, drawing upon the courage ignited by Thomas's words. The air felt thick and electric, buzzing with unspoken tension. But beyond the animosity, A flicker of resolve began to kindle inside him. This is bigger than business, he reminded himself. This is about justice. Thank you all for coming, he began, fighting to keep the tremor out of his voice. I stand here today not just to discuss the future of Reed Technologies, but to address an issue that transcends our profit margins. His words fell heavy, yet the silence that followed was pregnant with possibility. He shared the painful truth behind the exposé, the intricate web of lies and deceit that weaved through the company. Each revelation felt like a weight off his chest, a psychological release that fortified his spirit. Using facts and figures, he painted a vivid picture of systemic bias and the need for radical change, taking care to anchor his message in the experiences that had shaped him. As Marcus spoke, he noticed the shifting expressions across the faces in the room. Some nodded as if awakening from a slumber, others with skepticism laced in their brows. With each statistic he presented, Marcus felt the momentum shift. He was transforming from the prey into the hunter. Thoughts and emotions that once paralyzed him became tools for empowerment. Change must start from us, Marcus declared, allowing the words to reverberate against the polished boards. For every voice stifled by the noise of betrayal, for every ambition suffocated by systemic prejudice. He paused, locking eyes with Kalen. We owe them our fight. At that moment he saw the tide beginning to turn. Some board members began whispering amongst themselves. With a visible shift in energy, they felt the gravity of the discussion. This was not merely about his position. It was about confronting the greater injustices that plagued the industry. But doubt still lingered, lurking like a shadow. What if the backlash was more than just whispers? What if standing firm meant losing everything? Yet the resolve within him was now fortified by the desire to make his family's struggles matter. As he concluded his talk, the room erupted into a cacophony of debate. Questions rained down, a mix of genuine curiosity and resistance. For the first time since his flight had been grounded, Marcus felt a sense of control, as if he were orchestrating the unfolding narrative. The tension in the room transformed from dread to hope. Yet just as relief began to wash over him, a familiar voice cut through the disquiet. It's easy to preach change, Marcus, but who will pay for it? Kalen smirked, a calculated challenge that sent chills racing down Marcus's spine. The moment hung in the air, uncertainty coiling tightly around his mind. How would he counter this threat without compromising his vision? The pivotal question loomed. Would he risk everything he'd rebuilt against the antagonism that stood before him? The stakes couldn't be higher. The question lingered like the heavy scent of impending rain. Marcus clenched his fists at his sides, fighting against the rising tide of anxiety. Kalen's challenge pierced through his confidence, sowing seeds of doubt in the fertile ground of his ambition. Who would pay for the changes he demanded? Could he not only advocate for justice but also find the means to finance it? Each second stretched into an eternity as the boardroom remained locked in a spiraling vortex of uncertainty. Change, Marcus replied, regaining his footing as he steeled his resolve. It isn't merely an expense, it's an investment in our company's future. He felt both frantic and empowered, the tides of battle ebbing and flowing within him. Every business thrives on innovation, and our industry is stagnating. Transformational change can enhance our market position, attract diverse talent, and cultivate trust with our stakeholders. He caught the eye of a few board members whose eyebrows raised momentarily in intrigue. Was he reframing the narrative? He sensed a flicker of hope rising, yet Kalen's voice dripped with skepticism as he leaned back, arms crossed. And how do you propose we fund this lofty vision? You're suggesting we allocate resources to something that may not yield immediate returns. It's a risk no CEO should consider lightly. Marcus took a deep breath. He could feel the weight of the room pressing down on him, but he was also aware of the glimmer of resolve that now coiled tight within him. Let's be honest, he pressed on. If we don't adapt, we risk becoming irrelevant. Beneath the flashy surface of our market share, our company is losing its ability to connect with today's consumer, to connect with diverse talent, and ultimately to connect with the core values that once drove us. The murmurs grew more animated, voices fluctuating between agreement and the lingering seeds of doubt. A pivotal decision lay ahead, not just for himself, but for the entire team. Marcus resisted the temptation to glance at Kalen. He knew that acknowledging his rival would only give him more power. How can you lead this change when you barely know the pulse of your own company? Kalen pressed once more, a hint of malice tainting his tone. You've been in the shadows, haven't you? Who's to say you're not just chasing shadows this time? The question struck a nerve as Marcus's mind raced back to the time spent confronting personal demons while grappling with his family's legacy. It wasn't shadows he chased, it was truth. The truth of his journey, the truth of his employees' struggles, and the truth of the injustices that had flourished under Reed Technologies' roof. Beneath the enormity of this challenge lies a powerful truth, he declared, summoning the courage that had built within him. I may have spent years climbing the corporate ladder, but I have lived the experience, felt the weight of every marginalization, every ambition suppressed. I represent that struggle, and I'm not alone. Empathy surged through the room as some board members nodded. They seemed to recognize his sincerity. For the first time, Marcus felt the frigid ice of judgment begin to thaw. He had a choice: allow Kalen's challenges to undermine his vision or stand firmly rooted in his truth. Look, we're not merely discussing risks here, he continued, energy rising. We're discussing our responsibility as industry leaders to acknowledge inequalities and eradicate them. This is what defines us as not just a business, but as a community. The boardroom was unsettled, but a shift began to occur. Arguments against his vision crumbled in the wake of genuine debate, igniting passion and operational strategy. The discussion took on a life of its own, fueled not by Kalen's negativity, but by Marcus's message of empowerment and revelation. Yet just when the tide seemed to turn fully in his favor, Kalen sneered, "And if your vision fails? What will you tell the press when the board fires you for wasting their money?" A collective gasp rippled through the room, a chilling reminder of the higher stakes. The doubt returned, seated at the table beside him, glaring silently. Marcus felt stripped raw, the conflicting emotions swirling into a tempest of fear and determination. "I will tell them I dared to carve a path for future generations," he responded, unwavering, "that I chose to fight." Amid the rising tension, as the conversation unfurled around him, Marcus realized that he was not only fighting for a company, he was dismantling the very limits that had bound him for too long. The momentum shifted once more, but so did the fear of failure that lingered like a specter. It was the ghost of every risk he'd taken before, whispering of betrayal and loss. Would he crash and burn, or could he emerge victorious, having ignited a fire that would redefine Reed Technologies forever? Before he could delve deeper into his thoughts, another board member raised a hand, ready to voice concerns. "Marcus, you speak of revolutionary change, but what does that look like financially? What do we need to do now?" The pressure mounted, squeezing the oxygen from the room. Here it was, a moment that would define him, transform his vision into a framework, or subdue it forever. The stakes had never felt higher, and before him lay two paths, each leading toward unimaginable potential or fatal collapse. He took a deep breath, the air sharp with determination, and prepared to unveil the potential plan that might just be the turning point for not only the company, but for himself as well. Each detail had to be meticulously laid out. He would ensure they saw this as a crucial opportunity, not a liability. Just as he was about to speak, a loud knock interrupted the assembled group, the sound echoing through the glass walls, creating a jarring sense of intrusion. Communication from his colleagues was severed. Eyes darted to the door, curiosity and apprehension mingling like an electric charge in the air. What lay on the other side, and would it upend everything he had just built upon? The abrupt knock reverberated in Marcus's chest, momentarily arresting his thoughts. Was it an omen? A disruption from the outside world that threatened to dismantle the fragile consensus he was aiming to build? He could feel the weight of his next words pressing against his throat, simmering with the urgency of the moment. The board members shifted, their expressions reflecting varying degrees of curiosity and concern. "Shall I answer that?" asked Lydia, the head of operations, her tone tinged with protective instinct. Marcus merely nodded, though he felt an anxious knot tighten in his stomach. The door creaked open, revealing Jason, a trusted strategist. His face was pale, eyes wide with urgency, as though the fabric of the moment had been torn apart by a sudden reality. "Marcus, we need to talk. Now." The tone of his voice was sharp enough to cut through the haze of the boardroom. The tension was palpable, thickening the air that was already charged with anticipation. "What's going on?" Marcus could barely manage to keep the tremor out of his voice. He stepped away from the table, pulling Jason aside for a moment to gauge the situation without causing further alarm in the room. "It's about Kalen," Jason whispered, glancing back to make sure no one could overhear. "He's been feeding information to the press. There's a story brewing, one that could both tarnish your vision and complicate our initiatives moving forward." The impact of Jason's words struck Marcus like a hard slap. A wave of disbelief washed over him. How could someone within their midst, supposedly a colleague, act so insidiously? Was all that talk of community and responsibility mere pretense to him? "Do they have any specifics?" Marcus gritted his teeth, channeling the impending betrayal into a steely resolve. "What are they saying?" "Rumors, mostly. Allegations of mismanagement, suggestions that you're unqualified. It's gaining traction. If this breaks before you secure their support, it could derail everything," Jason warned, his eyes full of urgency as Marcus fought to contain the swell of emotions threatening to engulf him. Marcus could feel the boardroom's walls closing in, thick with doubt and uncertainty, even more so now. Would they silently entertain the allegations, believing the shadow Kalen cast rather than the light he sought to illuminate? Every instinct within him screamed to act quickly, to affirm his position could not be undermined with mere whispers. But he needed a strategy. "Let me speak with the board and call a meeting with the stakeholders," Marcus replied, a plan slowly crystallizing in his mind. He needed to tackle the situation head-on, expose the ruse for what it was while simultaneously reasserting the value of his proposals. But uncertainty gripped him. Would announcing Kalen's underhanded tactics only provide fodder for further speculation? Yet staying silent felt like murder to his ambitions. This was a fight for more than just Reed Technologies. It was a fight for his very identity, the legacy he yearned to build. "Get me the analytics and results from the last quarter," Marcus instructed in a low voice. "If they want to question my leadership, let's use the data to counter with facts." Jason nodded and slipped out of the boardroom, leaving Marcus alone with a mound of anxieties. Would he be viewed as a desperate man, scrabbling for a way to defend a faltering position? Or could he pivot this to an opportunity, a moment of clarity that demonstrated his resilience? "Everything rests on your shoulders now, Marcus," he whispered to himself, the weight of his aspirations crashing down like waves on a rocky shore. Taking a deep breath, he returned to the boardroom, where esteemed peers awaited him. The atmosphere was dense with uncertainty. Marcus needed to wield it into empowerment. "I've just received urgent news that might affect the decision-making process," he announced, eyes scanning the room, adventurous flickers of curiosity igniting with his words. Board members shifted forward, apprehensively interested. "What I've learned will change how we approach this discussion. We're facing some adversity from within. But let's remember, every challenge presents an opportunity. How can we embrace this moment and emerge stronger?" As they leaned in, ready to absorb his words, Marcus steeled himself for the next phase of his journey. Each question he anticipated would test his resolve and leadership in ways he hadn't encountered before. The atmosphere thickened with tension. Any moment could flip the conversation's tide. Marcus had marked the beginning of a battle he hadn't foreseen, one for transparency, integrity, and his future as a leader. Would he seize the moment to empower his vision, or succumb to the fear of failure seeded by betrayal? The boardroom settled into an edginess that vibrated through the air. Marcus felt the weight of every gaze on him, an unspoken judgment swirling in their silence. Each board member, whether they were ally or potential adversary, seemed poised to dissect his every word. This was much more than a mere business discussion. It felt like a trial with his leadership on the line. He sensed the urgency within himself, grappling to harness it into something productive. He took a moment, letting the gravity of the situation settle. As he studied the familiar faces around him, he could see flickers of doubt and concern in their eyes. They were pondering the same questions that gnawed at him. Was he truly the right person to lead? Or had he been a facade behind which incompetence thrived? Marcus pressed his lips together, channeling the fear into forward momentum. "Let's refocus on what really matters, our goals," he began, his voice steadier than he felt inside. He revealed the results from the last quarter, data that painted a picture of growth and potential. "This isn't just about me, it's about all of us, the vision we strive for." With each graph he laid out, he felt a little more grounded. He had proven his worth before, and he had to remind them why they had believed in him. As he elaborated on the analytics, a sense of prowess began to seep back into him. The figures illustrated progress, revenue gains, customer satisfaction metrics, and innovative milestones. He articulated strategies that stemmed from the reports, translating raw numbers into tangible futures. Yet even as Marcus spoke, a nagging voice inside him raised concerns. Did any of this matter if the whispers from Kalen were at the forefront of everyone's mind? Would any data obliterate the sting of betrayal? His heart quickened. He could feel the moment approaching, when he would have to face the allegations head-on, a necessary confrontation for his honor and vision. "However," he interjected, his voice more commanding, drawing their attention back. "We are at a critical juncture. We have to maintain our integrity in the face of outside skepticism and whisper campaigns. My capabilities are being challenged, which gives us a unique opportunity to demonstrate our commitment to transparency." Pushing through his unease, Marcus continued. "Let's not wait for rumors to spiral. Let's set the narrative together. I propose we release a comprehensive report detailing our initiatives and their progress. This report will not only clarify my leadership, but also reinforce our shared commitment to accountability." The room buzzed with interest. Was it hope flickering in their expressions? As various members began to nod and whisper amongst themselves, he could sense a shift. Perhaps they were ready to back him, to unify against the false narratives emerging. But one voice rose above the rest. Lydia's, unyielding, but filled with purpose. "You're suggesting we become proactive contra to Kalen's undermining tactics?" "Yes," Marcus affirmed, locking eyes with her. "The time has come to face any charges head-on. We can publicly outline our values as a company while debunking unfounded rumors." Marcus could see the board's collective willingness to take a stand, but one thing nagged at him. Would it be enough to silence skepticism or galvanize it further? As conversation cascaded around him, thoughts swirled in Marcus's mind. Would this campaign be enough? What if it spurred Kalen to escalate his tactics? Each decision felt monumental, rippling into the future. He was not just defending his position, he was re-establishing a foundation, a critical moment for personal and corporate identity alike. Marcus's thoughts raced, plotting possible fallout, consequences, and whether any confrontation with Kalen could lay bare the truth while doing justice to his aspirations. He stood at the precipice of change, where every instinct urged him to forge ahead, but a flicker of fear nagged at him too. When the meeting concluded, he drew a breath, reflecting on each interaction. Polishing his resolve, he couldn't shake the feeling that an inevitable encounter awaited him. The moment of confrontation with Kalen was on the horizon. Would Marcus emerge as the resolute leader he aspired to be, or would this challenge break him? What would it reveal about his true capabilities? Marcus emerged from the boardroom, adrenaline still pulsing through him like a drumbeat. The meeting had started as a perilous climb, but he felt he had reached a temporary plateau, uncertain of how long it might last. Now his thoughts whirled, analyzing every word exchanged, every nod from his peers. Had he done enough to stem the tide of doubt? While the proposed report felt like a solid step, the real battle lay ahead. As he paced along the corridor, Marcus's mind drifted into the murky depths of his motivation. Was he fighting a good fight? Or was this an exercise in self-preservation? Had he grown beyond that? Or was he still driven by insecurity masked as ambition? His heart weighed heavy with both pride in his presentation and the gnawing fear of what lay ahead. He sought out Lydia, who had been one of the few voices of support. They found a quiet spot in a corner coffee shop, away from the watchful eyes of the boardroom. Marcus ordered a black coffee, his typical choice for clarity, and settled into the conversation that danced around possible strategies. I know you're fighting for our brand and the integrity of this company, Marcus, Lydia noted gently, her expression earnest. But what are you willing to sacrifice for it? Maybe we need to be thinking about deeper truths. Is it just about proving Kaylin wrong? Her question hit harder than any accusation thrown during the meeting. Marcus shifted in his seat, contemplating. It's about more than just him undermining me. It's bigger than that. If I can just push past this rumor, I'll be okay. But that's just a defense mechanism, she pointed out, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. What if you frame it differently? This is about the legacy you want to create. It's about the values we uphold as a company. He frowned at her suggestion before leaning back, ruminating. It was true. If he shifted the focus from self to team, a concept he had always championed, there existed a stronger front. What if I make this about our values and mission instead? True transparency can dispel the shadows that Kaylin casts. That's the spirit, Lydia encouraged, beaming at him. But make sure you ground your actions in authenticity. People will only believe what you show them and what you truly embody. As they discussed measurable metrics for success and broader company ethics, Marcus began to see the duality of his circumstance. This wasn't merely about him battling Kaylin. It was a chance to reshape what kind of leader he wanted to become. But with each new realization, Marcus couldn't ignore the latency of fear brewing within him. What if his efforts backfired? Shaking off his doubts, he refocused, determined to meet this challenge not with arrogance but with conviction rooted in shared purpose. Just as inspiration swelled, a sinking feeling descended. In this new narrative, he wouldn't only have to challenge Kaylin, he might also need to confront his own flaws directly, acknowledging that his previous leadership style had often leaned towards isolationism. Lydia, I have to admit something. His voice faltered slightly, vulnerability creeping in. I've kept my distance from the team. I thought it made me stronger, but maybe that's been my biggest weakness. She nodded, her gaze unwavering. It's both a strength and a weakness. Embrace your human side. Leaders that hide tend to lose the trust that keeps their teams together. This is your chance to lean in, to create authentic connections. Motivated, Marcus resolved to open the doors of communication. This could be the moment where he not only re-established trust, but built an even stronger network within the company. Yet, as he ventured deeper into thoughts of team unity, the specter of Kaylin loomed ever larger. Would confronting Kaylin challenge Marcus's own leadership paradigm? Would this journey also allow him to discover hidden facets of himself? The path ahead felt rocky, but the clarity of purpose shone through the encroaching shadows of uncertainty. As he leaned into the plan, unsure of the impending confrontation with Kaylin yet resolved, a new thought consumed him. What if his greatest proving ground wasn't about the fight, but about understanding how to lead with true authenticity? The moment of truth was drawing nearer, and behind it lurked revelations that might reshape not just his role as a leader, but also the very fabric of their corporate culture. He knew the encounter with Kaylin would soon be unavoidable, and the stakes of that confrontation loomed larger than ever. Would Marcus rise to the occasion, empowered by this newfound perspective, or would he falter at the critical juncture of his transformation? As Marcus left the coffee shop, his thoughts became a cacophony of purpose and anxiety. The bustling streets felt suffocating, each footstep echoing his internal struggle. Clarity washed over him sporadically, but doubt still gnawed at the edges of his resolution. His next move needed to be intentional, grounded in the values he aimed to embody. A new strategy began to emerge. He would invite the team to collaborate on a town hall meeting, a platform where everyone could voice their concerns about the recent rumors and reaffirm their commitment to company principles. It was a gamble. Would this openness expose him, or provide the very connection he feared losing? As he settled into his office, preparing for the meeting, Marcus's nerves twisted tighter. He glanced around the space, the walls adorned with awards that now felt heavy with judgment. Had he earned these accolades, or had he been riding on the coattails of achievements pushed forth by his team? Remembering Lydia's words, he inhaled deeply, focusing on authenticity. The size of the challenge loomed larger than mere corporate politics. It was about reclaiming the narrative of leadership. By embracing vulnerability, he hoped to resonate more deeply with his colleagues. But what if that sincerity was mistaken for weakness? He was stepping into unknown territory, one riddled with the shadows of past decisions that frequently inclined toward isolation rather than connection. Moments before the meeting, Marcus stood at the conference room door, allowing the gravity of the situation to sink in. Reflecting on his previously guarded nature flashed before him: closed meetings, distilled feedback, and decisions made behind closed doors. A pattern emerged, revealing a pathway strewn with false impressions of strength. The room filled with familiar faces, their expressions shifting from anxiety to curiosity as he locked eyes with each of them. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steadying as he felt the weight of their collective attention. "I want to address the rumors head-on. I know there's been concern, and it's time for us to speak openly about it." The words flowed from him, sonorous yet vulnerable, each sentence challenging the barriers he had carefully constructed. He detailed Kalen's descent, but he reframed it, emphasizing the importance of collaboration, transparency, and integrity. As he opened the floor for discussion, the initial silence was palpable. Yet, as employees began to share their thoughts, their concerns morphed into a potent dialogue. Ideas bloomed like flowers unfurling toward the sun, and Marcus listened intently. Every voice resonated with authenticity, giving him glimpses of the values they collectively cherished, values he had often overlooked in his quest for authority. However, the mood shifted with Kalen's arrival at the meeting, disruptively asserting himself with a calculated bravado. "Let's not take a trip down this emotional rabbit hole, Marcus. We both know the numbers tell the truth. What you're pushing for won't cut it if we can't deliver results." Marcus felt his heart race, a mixture of defiance and vulnerability surging to the surface. It was as though Kalen had summoned every shadow from his past, every concern about worthiness, expertise, and merit, striking at the core of his newly formed resolve. "You're right about results being vital," Marcus replied, steeling himself with clarity. "But the quality of our work emerges from the strength of our foundation. Let's not just chase numbers. Let's redefine what success means together." The tension in the room hung thick, but his candidness had sparked a spark. Colleagues exchanged affirming glances, shifting the internal narrative from division to unity. Longing for affirmation, Marcus reminded himself that this was about discovering how to lead with purpose and authenticity, even while tethered to fear and doubt. Yet as Kalen's gaze remained fixed, Marcus sensed an impending clash, a confrontation layered with both personal stakes and professional repercussions. Could Marcus navigate this critical crossroads without losing his sense of self? The days ahead promised both clarity and confrontation. He must fortify his stance and ensure his voice became a beacon rather than an echo in the room, and yet the question remained: what costs would come with such authenticity? The next chapter of his journey awaited with bated breath, as tension hung in balance, poised for an inevitable clash that would test his newfound determination against the shadows of self-doubt and competition. As the discussion unfolded, Marcus felt an exhilarating weight lift off his shoulders. The openness he had invited into the room ignited a transformative energy. Voices echoed off the walls, revealing shared frustrations and collective dreams. For the first time, Marcus sensed he was part of a community rather than an isolated leader with burdensome responsibilities. But then, Kalen interrupted the flow. "This is all well and good, but bringing feelings into business doesn't pay bills. Let's focus on the real issues, not the fluff." Kalen's dismissive tone stabbed at Marcus's resolve, pulling him back to the tension that crackled on the surface of his newfound purpose. He couldn't ignore this verbal jab or let it undermine the fragile alliance that was forming in the room. In that instant, the stakes heightened. The confrontation now felt inevitable. "Kalen," Marcus began, his voice rising slightly to be heard over the murmur of unease rippling through the room. "Feelings aren't fluff. They're essential to fostering a workplace where innovation can thrive. When we feel connected, we produce quality. We can't ignore the human aspect of what we do." As he spoke, he could see the flicker of understanding and support in the eyes of his colleagues. Yet one glance at Kalen's narrowed gaze reminded him that this confrontation was as much about personal battles as it was professional. The tension coiled tighter as Kalen locked onto Marcus, his demeanor icy and calculating. Words don't translate to action, Marcus. In the end, if these feel-good ideas don't equate to tangible results, they're nothing. Kalen's smirk was an irritation waiting to erupt. Deep down, Marcus questioned whether he truly believed that emotions fuel performance. Was he just seeking validation, or had he uncovered a central truth about leadership, one that valued relationships as much as results? Gathering himself, he pressed on. What I'm suggesting is that we redefine success beyond just numbers. If we genuinely care about our clients and each other, we build a brand that resonates with authenticity. People want to work for a company they believe in. Success will follow if we invest in our culture. The words hung in the air, a challenge that sparked a debate among his colleagues. Encouraged by his boldness, a few employees began to echo his sentiments, weighing in on the importance of team cohesion. A necessary dialogue was growing, blossoming just as he'd hoped. Yet not everyone was convinced. Kalen broke into the chatter again. You can't afford to ignore the facts, Marcus. Your idealism could cost us everything. As the exchange escalated, Marcus could feel the divide between them solidifying. Every retort was a reminder of the precariousness of his position. This was a battle of legacy, values, and who held sway over the future of the team. With every heartbeat, the clash felt more personal, challenging not just his ideas but the very essence of his leadership. Marcus's internal dialogue began to seep through. Perhaps this was the moment he had feared, the point of no return where he must stand for his principles, risking it all. If he faltered now, he would anchor himself back in the disconnection he had fought to escape. As voices clashed, Marcus took a moment of introspection amid the whirlpool of emotions. What if he lost this fight? Yet even more frightening was the thought of retracting into silence, leaving a world of connections unexplored and ideals unachieved. His resolution began to crystallize. He would stand his ground. Authenticity demanded courage, and while he questioned whether he would prevail, he knew he had no choice but to face Kalen and the shifting tides. Results matter, Kalen, he said firmly, allowing a steadiness to resonate through him. But a team that is engaged and inspired will produce results that far exceed mere numbers. I'm choosing to prioritize growth alongside our outcomes, and I invite you to see the bigger picture. The room paused, a silent tension replacing the heated debate. As he locked eyes with Kalen, both men held their breath, gauging each other's resolve. This wouldn't just be a confrontation. It felt like the beginning of a battle that could redefine not just Marcus's future, but the very fabric of their workplace. With the atmosphere thick with uncertainty, an unexpected spark ignited. Would they embrace this new direction, or would the old ways claw back into dominance? As the dichotomy between results and relationships hung suspended, Marcus steeled himself for the outcome that loomed just beyond the horizon. A reckoning was approaching that would determine the very essence of his leadership. What path would he choose as the stakes intensified, with every decision threatening to alter the foundation he sought to build? The silence enveloping the room felt heavy, a palpable mix of anxiety and anticipation. Marcus's heart raced as he faced Kalen, the unyielding force that represented a deeply ingrained skepticism towards change. The others were watching, waiting for a shift, a sign that one of them might emerge victorious. In that moment, clarity struck Marcus. He realized that this was not just an argument over methodology. It was a reflection of his very identity as a leader. A flicker of doubt threatened the resolve he had gathered, but he drew on his commitment to authenticity. He had moved through the fog of isolation towards a vibrant potential for connection. There was no turning back. Let's break it down, Marcus continued, his voice steady, attempting to channel the unease into constructive energy. What does success really look like for us? If we're measuring it purely in profits, how do we account for the culture we create? Our well-being and enthusiasm have a direct correlation with our performance. You can't separate them. With each word, he felt a growing sense of purpose emerging from within. He wasn't merely defending a position, he was advocating for their future. Kalen's skepticism began to resonate as a challenge rather than a threat, forcing Marcus to confront the doubts that simmered beneath the surface. What if business had been reduced to the bottom line, devoid of the spirit that made their work meaningful. Those thoughts galvanized him, shining light on a path he had only just begun to tread. Kalen opened his mouth as if to interject, but Marcus pressed on. I've learned that the most valuable asset we have has nothing to do with numbers. It's the trust we build amongst ourselves. It's the willingness to come together and tackle challenges as a united front. It's about being invested in each other's growth. When did we start to believe that personal connections were secondary in our pursuit of achievement? Scanning the room, he witnessed thoughtful nods and contemplative gazes. Some colleagues began to whisper encouragement to one another, as if beginning to see the foundation he envisioned. The energy of the dialogue shifted, as if the wall between conflicting philosophies had cracked, allowing a glimmer of light to seep through. However, Kalen remained immovable, his features betraying a mount of stubbornness that almost seemed comical, in contrast to the growing momentum. You're dreaming if you think anyone would prioritize feelings over results. That's not how the world works. The boldness of Kalen's dismissal gnawed at Marcus, igniting a fire no less fierce than that which had dawned within him. But it should be, he shot back, surprising even himself. We're not simply cogs in a machine, we're creators. If we want to remain relevant, we must evolve. Businesses built on genuine human connections attract customers who can feel our authenticity. Isn't that what we all want? A legacy? For the first time, uncertainty flickered in Kalen's eyes. Just for a moment. It was a shift, albeit slight, but enough for Marcus to sense the tide beginning to turn. Could the foundation of the old be destabilizing? Did Kalen realize he was not fighting against a mere idea, but against the future? As the murmurs around the room increased in volume, Marcus felt exhilarated. Failure felt less menacing when faced with the possibility of collaboration, and he realized that his role in this conflict was not just to stand his ground, but to ignite a flame of inspiration within others. He hadn't just asked them to support an idea, but was inviting them on a journey, a transformation of their workplace dynamics into something fuller and more enriching. Words reverberated within him, reflecting his own conviction. A leader's true power lies in reframing adversity as an opportunity for growth. With a deep breath, Marcus locked eyes with Kalen once more. The time has come to choose which road we pursue. Results will surely follow when we empower each other to thrive. Are you willing to take that leap? The room buzzed with anticipation, the enormity of the moment hanging thick in the air. Would they stand united, ready to break free from the constraints of the past? Or would fear of the unknown send them spiraling back into an old way of doing things? With every soul present straddling the line of choice, Marcus felt the weight of their collective fate resting heavily upon his shoulders. The battle between progress and stagnation had begun, and now, with every heartbeat, the question lingered. How far was he willing to push for the change he knew was necessary? It was a beckoning for all to decide, and not just for Marcus. It was a call to accountability, a defining moment that could either shatter them or set them alight. Marcus Reed stood in the same boardroom, yet the atmosphere had shifted dramatically under the weight of intention and clarity. In the aftermath of the tumultuous conversation with Kalen, a transformation unveiled itself, not just for the company, but for Marcus as a leader. As he reflected on the journey that had brought him here, he recognized a fundamental change. He had traded fear for conviction and vulnerability for authentic strength. Days had passed since that pivotal meeting. The once looming specter of doubt diminished as he immersed himself in fostering a culture of open dialogue and trust within Reed Technologies. Rather than seeing his role strictly as a top-down authority, he embraced the collaborative spirit that his colleagues had ignited. No longer would he operate in the shadows, fearing judgment or rebuke. Instead, he stepped into the light, willing to embrace both success and failure, knowing that each was integral to the journey. In the following weeks, the company implemented change rooted in Marcus's vision. A town hall series kicked off, allowing employees to voice concerns, share ideas, and cultivate a sense of belonging. The results were palpable. Through active engagement, Marcus fostered a deeper connection among the team, challenging them to look beyond their immediate roles. Employees rallied around shared values, bridging gaps that had long kept individuals entangled in isolation rather than collaboration. As financial reports began to reflect these cultural shifts, the convergence between heart and metrics became increasingly evident. The revived atmosphere of connection translated into innovative solutions and efficiency, posting record gains and enhanced employee satisfaction. Building relationships fortified the foundation of Marcus's leadership, allowing Reed Technologies to thrive amidst adversity. In a milestone meeting, the board convened to discuss the subsequent quarterly report. Marcus stood before them, presenting results that expressed not only financial growth, but also transformation within the company dynamics. The atmosphere buzzed with potential, and many who once sat on the fence leaned in, actively engaging with ideas of progressive practices and sustainable values. Recognition flooded in. The board expressed tangible support for additional resources allocated primarily towards employee training programs and inclusion initiatives. This was not just a win for the bottom line, but a victory for a reinvigorated culture that truly reflected the ethos Marcus aspired to create from the start. They had come together, united by a vision of change that transcended mere profit margins to embrace humanity in the workplace. Meanwhile, the lingering shadow of Kalen served to remind Marcus of the challenges he had overcome. Facing adversity head-on became a catalyst for growth, not just overcoming the negativity spread, but illuminating the path towards a brighter future. Kalen was now an afterthought, a disgruntled whisper, unable to break the momentum that Marcus had cultivated. Amidst these tangible achievements, a deeper sense of personal fulfillment blossomed within him. Marcus reflected on what his late father would have thought, filled with pride at the legacy of resilience and authenticity that his son had forged. Embracing the truths of both struggle and success, Marcus stepped into the role of a fearless leader. His narrative transformed from merely defending his position to shaping the future of an organization that echoed his values. The final board meeting of the fiscal year felt triumphant. As the discussions established a new strategic roadmap, Marcus realized he had not just secured his place as a leader but had redefined leadership itself. His commitment to transparency, collaboration, and empathy inspired those around him, reverberating through the entire organization. As the meeting concluded, the validation he had yearned for materialized through applause, not just from recognition of financial stability, but from a sense that integrity had reigned victorious. Marcus stood firm, embodying a sense of solid confidence, his competence widely acknowledged, not by empty accolades but by tangible change in culture. As he left the boardroom, Marcus felt lighter, empowered by an unwavering sense of achievement. He had forged beyond the trials of fear, transformed through advocacy not merely for himself, but for the people he served. In confronting challenges, he had discovered that true leadership thrives on the willingness to connect, the courage to face betrayal, and the determination to champion integrity. This newfound understanding propelled him forward, standing before a vision that beckoned not just for business success, but for a legacy cultivated in connection and unwavering values. With every step he took into the future, he carried with him the assurance that he no longer merely occupied a seat at the table. He had carved out a space of his own. This was a moment of true transformation. The legacy that Marcus would build began here, an unwavering commitment to progress, a fight for equity, and above all, the understanding that success thrived in community and connection. Now, this is your moment to seize the opportunity to inspire others. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support is vital for us. Comment your reactions and theories about this transformative journey we just witnessed. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of taking these actions.